All right, everybody. Hello. So, before we get started, I'm going to ask you guys to do me a favor because I did a replay of the video last week when we had the Q&A last week, and this microphone was crackling the whole time. Usually that's a bad cable, but I don't know how that works with USB. This is the first USB mic I ever got. All my other mics have always been XLR. If you get crackling with an XLR mic, usually that's the cable, and you replace the cable, everything's fine. Hello, Cardo. So anyway, if you hear crackling, I would appreciate you telling me so I can play with some knobs here and see if we can't fix it, okay? All right. Anyway, so yes, we have a question this week. We actually got it right after the Q&A was finished. This is from David. David asks, how necessary is it to learn all the modes of the scales, and where can I find an instructional trumpet cornet book that covers the scales in depth? Okay, so that's two questions, and I have two answers for the two questions. It's not the same. So, my first answer to you is I think knowledge of the modes is theoretical, and that practicing modes is a waste of time. I know that's one of the most controversial things I say. Um, but I firmly, truly, sincerely believe this. Practicing modes is a waste of time. And what we're talking about, let me make sure here. Let me read the question again. How necessary is it to learn all the modes of the scales? Normally, when we talk about modes, we're talking about jazz improvisation, right? Now, outside of jazz improvisation, there might be something that requires you to learn the modes. And the only thing I'm familiar with is 16th century counterpoint, where you might want to write in the ancient church modes. I'm assuming that's not what you're talking about. So, in either regard, unless there's something out there that I'm not familiar with, in either regard, needing the requirement of having technique in those modes, pursuing that as a goal, is a tremendous waste of time and a huge distraction. Now let me be more specific about why I say that. When we talk about modes in this context, most people are asking because they think that the way that we play jazz is if it's a two chord, a five chord, a one chord, then you play over the two chord, the Dorian mode, D Dorian mode. Let's say we're talking about a 2-5-1 in C. D minor 7, you're going to play the D Dorian mode. G7, you're going to play G Mixolydian. And C major, C major 7, you're going to play the C major chord or major scale, which in the modes we would call that Ionian. This is absolutely wrong. This is absolutely wrong. This is like the worst way to learn how to improvise jazz. I wish I could share a screen because that's what I would do if we were having a lesson. But do it mentally, okay? Think about what are the notes to the D Dorian scale. What are the notes to the G Mixolydian scale? What are the notes to the C major scale? Now, let me ask you, which notes were different? There were no different notes. We did not use any different notes. D minor 7, G7, C major 7, that's all C major. Every single bit of it is C major. We don't play, when we're improvising over that. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't people who do that. And I've talked about this before in some of the previous Q&As, or maybe in some of the videos. I think what has happened over the years is because this has been taught for so long that there are now people who have become kind of successful improvising, playing that way, which is really messed up if you ask me. Because when the people who came up with this play the right mode over the right chord thing were trying to do, they were trying to teach what the greats were doing, but the greats weren't doing that. If you pour through interviews and even looking at their transcriptions and stuff like that, that's not there. It's not there. There is no time in the in the history of jazz where people actually played like that. You know, that's sort of like there's a parallel in classical music. There's a parallel to this is when we write counterpoint. The way they teach you how to write counterpoint is with the species counterpoint. Some of you who might have been to college might know what I'm talking about. There's a parallel here. That species counterpoint does not teach you how to write counterpoint, and it's nice exercises, but it doesn't help. Let me tell you this: I found out later, long after I got out of college, I found out later that species counterpoint was invented after that era. I think I don't remember exactly. Don't quote me on this, but that species stuff was developed, I think, hundreds of years later. After that style of writing was long finished. Well, it was never finished. You know what I mean? When new styles had come along, all styles are here forever, almost. All let's put it this way: all great styles are here forever. I love writing in the style of Bach. I love writing in the style of Palestrina and things like that. I enjoy that. I as an exercise, I will go back and write stuff like that, and I love performing that stuff. So that music is not dead. People are still doing it. Anyway, so I like to see a parallel between those two things. The way they've been teaching jazz improvisation and the way they teach counterpoint, equally fallacious. Now, let's dig into a little bit why improvising that way is not good. You know, well, you know what? Before we go into that, let me give you a basic summary of how I teach jazz improvisation. You know, someone asked me at a gig, I think it was about a month ago. Someone asked me, the sax player. It was one of those nights where we had four horns, and the regular tenor player. He asked me. He says, "Eddie, if you had to summarize in 2 sentences your approach to jazz improvisation, how would you do that?" And I told him that I use motifs, jazz motifs, to speak the jazz language. It's as simple as that. All the other stuff that I do is in support of that. When I practice scales, it's to help me make connections between those motifs. And in fact, the scales that I practice are actually motivic. Let that sink in. The scales that I practice are actually motivic. I'm practicing motifs up and down in patterns. Those exact same motifs serve as like the glue between the jazz motifs. So, what is a jazz motif? Now, normally when I demonstrate this, I'll do a turnaround, but that's more harmonic. In this case, we're talking about modes. So, I'm going to give different demonstration. And I'm just making this up off the top of my head. Okay, what did I just do? I did an improvisation in C. I took a string of motifs, one after the other. The motifs are just like words. And basically, you string the motifs together to make a phrase. There is no modal stuff going on there. What I just played sounds like jazz because I'm using jazz language. I don't even have to, I could have played it all straight. It would have still sounded like jazz because I'm using jazz language. It's clearly distinguishable as jazz language. Okay, I know I'm going on about this. So when I play those motifs that I just played now, with some exception, it doesn't matter whether I use that motif over the D minor 7 chord or the G7 chord or the C major 7 chord. There are some exceptions. You do want certain resolutions to happen certain places. There are some exceptions, but for the most part, it doesn't matter. As long as you're speaking in that key, most of those motifs will fit anywhere. And the same thing is true of the scale patterns that I'm talking about. So one of the scale patterns I do, right? So what if I incorporate that into an improvisation? Now, which chord is that supposed to fit over? It fits almost over any of those chords that are in the key of C. Where things get a little bit more tricky is when you start having chords that have other notes besides diatonic notes. So if you have a C sharp, let's say it is a turnaround. So if I'm practicing over a turnaround, I'm not practicing improvising over a turnaround. That's 4 measures long. Okay, that wasn't a very good one. That would have fit, but I didn't hit what I wanted to hit. But and that maybe me screwing that up right now helps make the point, because over those chords could have been E minor 7 or C major 7, A7, D minor 7, G7. What I just played now would have fit. What I'm trying to do is improvise something that actually emphasizes that A7 there. Right, so that time that time I actually emphasize the chords a little bit better. So one of the things I tell people is that I play the harmonies motivically. I use I use motifs that outline those progressions. I'm not thinking to myself, oh, let me arpeggiate on the A7. Let me arpeggiate on the D. I'm not trying to play the chords. I'm trying to play stuff that aligns with the chords. Now, second half of the question is, oh, wait, do you know what? There's one thing I need to say before we move on. Playing modal music is not the same thing as learning the modes. So let's say we have a piece, just to be like, let's say we have a piece that is in the Phrygian mode. And in this case, keeping it in the key of C. In this case, we would be talking about E Phrygian. The fingerings do not change. You just say to yourself, this is E Phrygian, so all the finger patterns that I have for the key of C fit. It's not a different scale. E Phrygian is C major. And I'll say one more thing because it's going to connect to the second half of the question. I'll say one more thing about that. One of the reasons I can have this approach to the modes is because the scales that I teach are comprehensive. We go to the top of our range, we go to the bottom of our range. We flip all the intervals back and forth for 4 different variations. And we use the 3 notes, the 4 notes, the thirds, the fourths, and the triads. That's I call that the bare minimum. There are more than that. I actually practice myself 60 different variations of on the major scales. So if I'm practicing, let's compare the way I do scales for C major and D Dorian. Here's C major, only going up to G. Now here's the same pattern, but with D Dorian. There is absolutely nothing different between those two scales except where I started. When I say that the modes are a waste of time, that's what I'm talking about. I believe when you practice your scales, it should be these comprehensive patterns that you're practicing. Not just the da 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 da. I believe that stuff is a nice little introduction. If after you learn those I call them band scales. If after you learn those band scales, you're still practicing the band scales, you're wasting your time. You've stagnated. That's my belief. And I will go as far as to say this. If that's all the scales that you're practicing, then you better be practicing the modes. Okay? I know that sounds like I'm contradicting myself. If all you practice for scales is the do re mi scales, da ba 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 da 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 dum. If that's how you practice your scales, then yes, you need to master the modes too, because at least that's a little something more than just do re mi. At least it's something. But it's extremely inferior to what you actually need to actually be a great improviser. It's so far short of what you actually need. So the other half of the question is, where do you get those scales? And first of all, I believe you should always start with the majors first. And the scales that I teach are the ones that I sell, and I know that sounds like I'm doing an advertisement here. Um, and I think most of you guys know that's not how I operate. But what I teach, this is the best thing you can do. They're called tonalization studies. What I teach for scales is tonalization studies. If you practice the tonalization studies, you don't have to practice the modes. If you practice tonalization studies, the modes are a waste of time. Okay, I hope that makes sense. All right, so took me 20 minutes. Sorry about that. Anthony says, well, by the way, hello, Anthony. Nice to see you. Hello, Eddie. Hope you are well. I am just warming up to practice, but I am here standing by, listening for something you say that will make me a great and rich trumpet player, much like Bix biofeedback. Biofeedback. Um, I had a student one day. I asked, I always ask people what it is they want to accomplish in the trumpet lessons, and this junior high student, he tells me, no, I think he was in elementary school at the time. He tells me, I want to be rich and famous. Oh no, not gonna happen as a trumpet player. Not the rich part or the famous part, either way. Anyway, Cardo says, hi Eddie, I have a question. Did you ever have to play a gig with your chops fried? And if so, how did you survive it? Man, oh man. Too many times. Too many times. So the last time this happened to me, let's say the most recent time this happened to me was about 3 years ago. I was doing a debutante show, and the sax player had just come out of some chemotherapy or no, brain surgery. And usually he was like the horse in the show, the workhorse. And the leader was concerned that because he had the surgery, the doctor told him not to play so loud. And what happened was, it was at a place, it was at one of those country clubs where they feed us before, and I must have eaten something in the meal beforehand that I'm allergic to, because my lips swelled up. I had almost instant, what do they call it? Edema. I think it's called edema. My lip swelled up. And so you said when your chops are fried, it's the same exact thing as playing with lips that have edema. It's exactly the same problem. So I think what happened was I had my lips were just slightly chapped, and some of the food got in where it was cracked, and the lip just swelled up. And I got through the gig. I think the worst song was that crooner song. I can't, the thing with me is it's always so hard for me to remember names. I can remember the tune, I don't remember the name of the tune. Just the way you look tonight. That's the name of the song. Okay. And I remember. So here's my general approach to surviving. You're asking me, how did I survive it? I play on the most open aperture I can get. When the lips are swollen up, you have to open the aperture. So I'm almost, I'm trying to get as open of a position as I can. And it did sound. It was not the best that I ever sounded. But the fact that I could survive the gig. Now I have two other stories like that I can tell you about. Um, there was one time. Now to understand this, you have to know that in the '90s and into the new millennium, I played mostly Spanish music. I played a lot of salsa, and there was some Tejano that I played. I don't if you guys don't know this, I'm on a bunch of Tejano CDs. I'm on a bunch of great Tejano CDs. Um some famous recordings. It's not uncommon when I had Tejano gigs. Just to show you how famous these recordings are. When I had Tejano gigs, like with Aviso or someone like that, I would go to the club, and the music that they're playing on the PA, on the DJ, is stuff that I recorded. That has happened to me a lot of times. Um, just to give you an example, David Mares, I'm on a few of his CDs. The Royal Jesters, I'm on their CDs. Jimmy Edward, I'm on his CDs. Uh, there's a CD by Little Joe and La Familia. I'm on his CD. Um, but anyway, so this this second story I'm telling, we were doing one of those Tejano CDs. And the reason I wanted to tell you all that is because when you're playing Spanish music, Cinco de Mayo week is a whole week of gigs. Like every club, every organization, they all want to have music, Spanish music for their Cinco de Mayo celebration, right? Really, what it is a way for them to sell Dos Equis or whatever. So, you know, um, and so I had a recording session for one of these Tejano recordings, uh, right before Cinco de Mayo week, and this is before I knew how to say no. And so we're in the studio, and he says, "Play it again, play it again, play it again." It wasn't really high. I think the highest note was like D above high C. But the lowest note was G above high C, and it was loud. And I don't remember what it was, but it was the kind of thing. Let me change my. No, where's my mouthpiece? So it was something like this. It was the introduction of a Tejano song. Something like that. And it was about 16 bars long. And we kept doing. Now to understand this part of it, you have to understand that this chart wasn't finished getting written. The guy wasn't finished writing the chart. He wasn't sure. It wasn't that I couldn't play it. He wasn't sure what he wanted. So he kept changing the notes, and he kept changing the rhythms. And we kept playing it over and over and over again. And by a certain point in time, I don't remember how deep into it was time-wise, but at a certain point, I had no lips left. My lips were so swollen up that I couldn't play. And this was on the day before a whole week of Cinco de Mayo gigs. I had to play on this busted up lip for a whole week playing salsa and Tejano music. I had to play on that lip for a whole week. I'm lucky, really, when I think back about it. I'm lucky I didn't cause any permanent damage. But once again, how do I do that? How do I make that work? I always play on a much more open aperture. And for those of you who don't know this, the aperture is the hole in the middle. The hole that the and you know what? I'm going to admit that I might not even be making the aperture. This might just be a what I call a visualization. And when I say what I call a visualization, I mean it might not actually be what I'm saying it is. I'm saying it's a more open aperture. What I'm saying is it feels like I'm opening the aperture up. It's probably not really truthfully getting to be more of an open aperture. But yes, when I get busted in the lip, I have to open everything up so that the notes actually pass through. I hope that makes sense. If I don't do that, uh, there's just no way to play. Just no way to play. Now, there's another time that this happened where I got a friend of mine, we're on a gig, and the trombone player and I, we talk a lot on the gig because a lot of times we're just background music, right? So I'll be leaning over like this, talking to him. And I realized we're about to play. So I put my horn up and I pop myself in the mouth. Same exact problem, right? 3 different ways this can happen. One is from playing too much without letting the lips let the blood flow through. Another one is from food allergy, and the other one is from injury, an accident. The way you play that way is the same in all 3 cases. Now, I'm going to add to that. I had another situation where I had a tooth that was broken in half, a molar back here that broke in half, and I could not get it fixed until after a string of gigs because I could not, when you're living on that close to the edge. Most of my adult life, we lived, what's that old term, hand to mouth. What that means is you're just making just enough money to pay the bills. And if I had taken time off to get my mouth fixed, we would not have paid the bills. So I played on a broken tooth for, I think, 2 weeks. And all the air pressure that went up into there would push on that nerve, and it was excruciating. So I air around the teeth through the center of my mouth, pushing the tongue up into the roof of the mouth so that it wouldn't push air on the exposed nerve. And yes, when you have to do the gig to pay the bills and you live that close to the edge. I don't live that close to the edge anymore. I can actually go get the tooth fixed and skip a couple gigs now. There's a bunch of reasons for that. Part of it is because I've diversified my income with the publishing and stuff like that. But yes, I don't live that close to the edge. But when you do live that close to the edge, you have to make it work. And you find ways, you've heard that old saying, necessity is the mother of invention. What that means, to translate into modern English, whatever you need is what determines what you invent, what you create. If there's a need, you will come up with a way to make it happen. So yes. But anyway, if your chops are fried, you open the aperture. That's dangerous though. Let me put a word of caution on there. When you open the aperture and play on a fried embouchure, you run the risk of damaging it permanently. You have to be extremely careful when you're doing this. If you're using pressure when you open the aperture like that, it's possible to rupture the stuff, because in order to make that aperture more open, you're going to have to drop the position on the lips. You're going to have to play closer to the pink. And when you do that, if you use pressure on that and drop the position, and because if you're doing this, you're probably playing loud music. At least that's what it was like for me. It is possible to just screw that up so bad that you can't you could come out of that not ever being able to play trumpet again. That's actually a phenomenon that can happen. I hope you that I hope that makes sense. All right. Hello, Jeffrey. Nice to see you. Anthony says, "Hey, if I remember my name in the morning, I'm having a good day." All right. Cardo says, "You sound great on that Tejano music." Well, thank you. Um, yeah, I did that stuff for a long time. I just found out that the producer on all those albums that I'm on just passed away. And we didn't get along. Uh, we had a showdown at a gig in Alice. Alice, Texas is where they have the Tejano Hall of Fame. And we had a gig down there with Jimmy Edward, and he was pissed off at me. And I thought that that was permanent. But apparently when he passed away, um one of the guys that worked with him a lot, not as a musician, but I think he was a DJ or something, he actually posted on Facebook and said that um I was his favorite trumpet player to work with. So even though we didn't get along all that well, he called me pendejo one time, and he thought I didn't know what that meant. So, you know, yeah, his exact words were, Eddie Lewis, we have a word for people like you, pendejo. I'm like, dude, I know what that means. I don't know why you talking to me like that, you know? But yeah, so he was a little bit rough around the edges. But yeah, he passed away, and after he passed away, they posted a thing on Facebook with one of the tracks that I recorded, and said that I was one of his favorite um, trumpet players for these sessions that we did. And I look back at my past, at all the great things that I've recorded and the great shows that I've done and stuff like that. I was talking to my sax player the other day. We had a jazz gig in Port Arthur, which is about 2 hours, 2.5 hours from here. And so I carpooled with the sax player. Now the sax player used to be the leader of the band, but he gave me the band, so now I'm the leader. Um, I get to wear the leader hat. So, and I was telling him that part of the frustration that I have today And this is not a I was careful not to make it sound like I don't like the bands I work with today, because it's not that. I love the guys that I work with today. I really do. Um, but it's how do I say this without sounding offensive, you know? Um, there were so many people that I worked with in the past that were absolutely legendary in the quality of the music that they played. Legendary. Um, and you know what? The truth is, I might feel that way if I had to stop working with the people I work with now. Would probably feel that way about them too. you know, that's what is that? What is that? Absence makes the heart grow fonder, right? And so a lot of those bands that I'm talking about, like I told you about this Tejano guy, he's passed away. That's not going to happen anymore. So you can't help but to be a little bit sad about that. You know. Um, But you know what I told him? I said, the way I've been looking at this now is that I see it my job now to so-called carry the torch. It's my job now to create that environment for other people in the bands that I lead. I want to create that legendary kind of musical experience, not just for my musicians, but also for the audience. Um, so that we can pass the torch and pay it forward, so to speak. So yeah. Um, so any of you guys, if you want to see some of the recordings that I'm on, you can go to my website, click on bio, and you know what I'm going to start doing? I'm going to start editing these things so that you can have cards. If someone comes and watches this later, there'll be a card up here so that you can just click on the card. But for now, you can go to bio, click on resume, and halfway down the page is a list of all the CDs I'm on. Now, most of them at the top are my CDs, but starting going back, starting in 2014, and what I mean by starting in 2014, going back in time, 2014, there's recordings that I have, and most of them, okay, I take that back. I thought most of them had links. Oh, okay, yeah, I'm right. Most of them do have links. And you can actually click on the link and go here, the recordings. Some of them, the only links I could find um, were for the buying the recording. So like Chicanismo, yeah, it's gone. Chicanismo is even gone off of Amazon. That's just very unfortunate. Pride and Passion. Okay, Pride and Passion you can listen to. Hey, how about that? Let me put a link here in the description. I mean, not the description, in the live stream. So there's Pride and Passion. That's one of the Tejano things I'm on. And that producer I'm talking about, that's him. That's Bob Gallarza. So Pride and Passion is one of those ones that I was on, and I think actually Pride and Passion might have been the one where he called me pendejo. Okay. So anyway, you can go check those things out. I'm also on David Lopez, Solo Para Ti. I think that David Lopez might have been the very first one that I did with Bob. I might be wrong about that, but I think that was the very first one. Cardo says, thanks for sharing those Tejano stories. If you have permanent injury, it means you can't even produce a sound on the trumpet anymore. Yeah, that's what it means. You know, the first time I encountered that was online. I had a guy, and you know what? I've told this story so many times. I'm afraid nowadays that maybe I've got it wrong because just that's how life works, right? You tell a story over and over and over again, it starts to change. And but I had someone contact me. This is what back when I first started giving internet advice. By the way, this what I'm doing here, where I share my solutions with people. I've been doing this for free since the internet started, since the mid 90s. So this guy, I had already developed in the 90s a reputation for helping people. And so he emailed me. He was asking me, couldn't I help him? And what he described to me, he said that he was a student at the university, and he said that he had an arrangement with a church so that he would be the janitor in exchange for some place to practice. Great deal, right? Clean the place up. Now you can practice there. What a wonderful deal! Some people, you guys, if any serious trumpet players want to find a way to practice, you know, if you're at university and you don't like practicing in those little rooms, um, you know, you can uh, make that kind of a deal. But anyway, he said that he was tired of just piddling along, and he decided one Saturday morning, this is it. He's going to start taking this seriously. And he said he had the best practice that day. He practiced over 8 hours. Like I said, this might now be just a legend because it's been so long. This was in the 90s. And I've told this story so many times it probably changed, and it's probably not his original story anymore. But the story is still legendarily true. Okay? So, anyway, he had the best practice of his lifetime, put the horn in the case, got up the next day, took the horn out of the case, and could not play a note and has not played the note since. He ruined his career in one day of practice. The day that he decided, the irony is so incredible, right? The day he decided to stop piddling around and take this seriously was the day that he damaged his lips so badly that he couldn't play a note afterwards. Now, my theory, and it can only be theory because I never worked with him, my theory is that he did nerve damage. So the kinds of damage you can do to your lips, there's two kinds of damage. The first kind of damage is um, most likely nerve damage, where you hurt the nerve so badly that they can't, the signal from the brain cannot go to the lips. You kill the nerves to your lips. Now, remember, we have two sets of nerves. We have motor and sensory. Just because you can still feel your lips does not mean that the motor nerves are still functional. Now, there's also another kind of damage, and that's when you have physical damage. And you know what? That kind of damage can be separated into different categories. You can have, for example, the You know how the muscle and the skin are connected to each other so that when you roll your skin in, the muscle moves with it, or vice versa? It's possible to damage your lips so that the skin and the muscle are no longer connected to each other. If the skin and the muscle are not connected to each other, you can't play. That's one kind of damage. Another kind of damage is if you rupture the muscles, and that's the kind of damage I was talking about before. You can actually just obliterate the muscles so that, and if they heal after that, you have a big lump. You actually, if you rupture it that bad that you have scar tissue on the muscle itself, and I'm not a doctor, I might be saying this entirely wrong, but you don't understand my points, right? If it's that bad, you have to either go to a different position in your face or just quit. It's serious, serious stuff. And I'm sure there's other ways to have damage too. Those are just two, um, the rupture and the skin separating from the muscle. Those are just two of the ways. And then there's the nerve damage. That's another way. Cardo says, thanks, Eddie. You are a gem of a person for sharing so much valuable information for free. Well, thank you. I appreciate your kind words. Any other questions? We're about winding down. Just about to wind down. I hope you guys are having a good week, I hope you have had a good week. Um, I decided I was on lessons.com the other day, not the other day, yesterday, and I saw that I didn't have any reviews, and I don't know why I thought I had reviews, but um, so I sent an email out to each of my students asking to have them put some reviews, and um, and it was so touching. Some of the stuff that people have been saying on these reviews, it's I'm one of those nose to the grindstone guys. I hardly ever take a break. I hardly ever slow down. I hardly ever stop to appreciate what it is, the fruits of my labor, I guess is a way to say it. And to read some of these reviews that these guys are writing, it's just very touching, you know. I'm gonna put some of them up on my website. Um, but yeah, it's very touching, and I actually appreciate that that people are actually getting that much out of what we do. If it wasn't for that, I don't think I'd be doing this. I'd be going to do something to make money. Right? That's the funny part. But yeah, I mean, I told you guys last week that God put me here to teach people how to play trumpet. And, you know, that's the medium that He wants me to work in. Anyway, if we don't have any more questions, I think I'll close it. I have a new format that I'm gonna do. I'm gonna just starting this now. I want to start adding. Remember, I said earlier that I would add a card. I want to start looking at the video afterwards and put cards and put links from the website to direct answers. There's a bunch of work I'm gonna do after we close down. Cardo says you can be rich without much money. You know, that's the story of my life. I've told you guys before that most of my life I've lived under the poverty line. You know, when you talk about the poverty line, it's basically an arbitrary number that the government uses to determine who should get welfare. And um, up until 2007, not only did I live beneath the poverty line, I lived well beneath the poverty line. Um, there were many years where if you took the poverty line and took it to half, that's what my income was. Um, I, and I'm not complaining about that. We never took welfare of any sort. No food stamps, no welfare, no. With my son, we never did. Well, most of that time he was homeschooled anyway. But we never did the lunch program at school or anything like that. We could have taken all of that. We could have taken all of that. But we didn't need that. And it's like what you're saying, Cardo. You don't have to have money to be rich. And you know, I think most people when they say that, what they mean is something emotional. But for me, it's not emotional. There's a very practical sense. You could, you know, we are stewards of the money that we're given, and if we use it well, if we make wise choices, then we don't have to live on the government's teat. Leonard, hello, Leonard. Leonard is my friend in South Africa. He says, "Thanks, Eddie. Appreciate your willingness to share." Yeah, I'm always. Yeah, I appreciate you guys. So, Leonard, I keep forgetting to write to you. And by the way, Leonard, thank you for your last email. I apologize for not responding. I keep meaning to write to you and ask about that student, how it's going. But I will do that now that I'm saying it out loud. Bruno says, I sometimes struggle with seat inside the staff. Sometimes eat inside the staff seems impossible. Do you know what I could do? That's a very personal thing. I can tell you my overall approach. But we are out of time right now. How about I copy and paste that into the questions section on the website, and we'll start with that next week. Because it would take me more time than what we have right now to answer that question. Okay. Leonard says he is doing very well back up to apprentice level. Oh, that's just a wonderful thing to hear. That's a wonderful thing to hear. All right. Well, guys, thank you again for hanging out. I want to show my sincere appreciation for you guys spending the time. And God bless you. And we'll see you on the next one. Okay. Thank you so much.